This is a one-sided disc. On the other side is simply the label of the record, and the record player which plays it is also surprisingly small and compact. That information is read by a laser from the underside. You simply place the disc in there like a conventional record player, and off you go.
There's a lot I have forgotten about December 2019. I couldn't tell you a single gift I got that year. Maybe I could recall visiting Cineplexes to see heists of entertainment like 1917, Uncut Gems, or Cats. But anything more would be a lie. Had I known this would be the end of the old world, I would have enshrined it more in my memory. Instead, I went through October, I went through November, I went through December, and treated it like any other year. I had goals, but everything else wasn't important. That would always be there. I can't recall Christmas 2019, but there's one thing I could. As I watched the nightly news, a new phenomenon emerged from Wuhan, China. They said somebody had eaten a bat or something, a virus was spreading, one that had unfathomable circumstances for anyone caught off guard, which, for well over the next year, was everyone. It's tough to recall when things shifted into panic mode, but everyone had their hypotheses. Pandemics were a thing of fiction. You read about them in a Michael Crichton book while wiping phantom sweat from your brow. Contagion wasn't real. Everything was going to be fine. The one thing I remember about December 2019 was the wagering. Everybody had bets on how long before the plague went away. I heard from people who believed it was a matter of weeks until life goes back to normal. Meanwhile, I was paranoid enough to hedge a bet that I still argue should have been the mindset the whole time. How long would it take to get the pandemic under control? 5 years. That's not exactly what somebody in a go-go economy wants to hear. As Joel Gray would say, money makes the world go round, that clanking, clacking sound. Still, I wanted to believe that putting aside the economy in favor of human decency would allow for progress. I couldn't fathom it myself. You grow up believing that life is precious and you can't take back time. Do what you love before it's too late. And so, the paradox begins. As I publish this, we're less than 6 months away from December 2024. We will be reaching the 5-year mark from when I first proposed this theory. In the grand scheme of things, I was way off of things going back to normal. That isn't to say the coronavirus went away. In that time, I've caught it twice, and there's new strains going out like hotcakes. I think the difference is that we've learned to live alongside it. There's vaccinations, we've got medications. Even if I think Joe Biden's choice to cancel programs dedicated to health and safety is ultimately bad, things are looking more optimistic. I feel that most people have done what they could to move past the collective trauma of COVID-19. I get it, the days of whistling away at home were unpleasant. Many dark and lonely nights were accounted for. Everyone wanted to find the light again. You want to get together with friends and remember what connection was like. You want everything to be like it was in November 2019, before America was stuck in a toilet paper shortage. I'm not here to tell you how to process your grief. Instead, I want to focus on the only thing that I'll miss about the past 5 years. It's the art we made along the way. To state the obvious, art is one of the most therapeutic forms of expression. While it could be easier to read a textbook, abstraction can bring more logic to reality. It conveys a feeling, placing the consumer in the moment. The best of art is transportive, carrying us through centuries and galaxies to find something human underneath the unknown. It scratches an itch that hard facts can't. Which is why I look at art from the past 5 years and cherish the feeling of being there to see it take shape. Ideally, nobody in a decade or two will go through a pandemic like this. Enough will have happened that society is more prepared. That is my hope anyway. There will come a day when the art I'm about to discuss will be an artifact, and I want it to be as dated as possible. I want the feelings of society, social distancing, and hand-washing songs that seem so silly we've evolved into a more conscious and sensitive public. I want mental health to be so destigmatized that Dear Evan Hansen seems farcical. Okay, it kind of is already, but I hope you get my point. But to get back to my point, 5 years is a long time no matter who you are. It's half a decade of your life. For me, it was the entire half of my early 30s. Unlike my 20s when it felt like I had lived so much life, this era became stalled in uncertainty. That isn't to say I haven't been busy, but my accomplishments are less fortuitous. They're more driven by the self than any greater aspirations of being validated. It has its pros and cons for sure, but it does make me realize, what did life mean over the past 5 years? So, to put things into context, 5 years is 1,826 days, or long enough for Taylor Swift to release 147 songs, Succession to win 19 Emmys, and for Bradley Cooper to lose 8 Oscars. And for those who aren't workaholics, it was also a chance to finally make what I'll just call pandemic art. To put it mildly, the quarantine gave people too much time to think. When the news was reporting deaths in the thousands daily, many had to question where they could turn to for escape. Some finally crossed The Sopranos off their bucket lists. Others learned to bake bread. Some found their own corner of TikTok to make them feel less alone. Basically, there were a lot of ways to distract. But what happened when distractions weren't enough? For artists, it meant creating something that allowed them to process complicated emotions. Maybe it was the feeling of isolation. Maybe it was uncertainty that the future held. For the first time in my adult life, there was reason to question mortality. Not only that, but optimistically, this was a once-in-a-century phenomenon, and documenting it would add something valuable to the pandemic canon. As time goes on, I remain fascinated by films. More often than not, the gimmicks failed to say much of anything, while resorting to the creator's worst tendencies. Oh sure, there are some that use the limitations effectively, and even build complex emotions around our new normal. But it felt like most weren't wanting to engage with it. They were cool with satire, so long as it didn't make them confront difficult emotions. I'd go so far as to argue that the other side of pandemic cinema was passion projects about the past. I think that's what's responsible for stuff like Belfast, Empire of Light, and The Fabelmans catching on like they did. To me, they symbolize the introspection that was common during lockdown. I'm sure these projects were long gestating by 2019, but with the public emphasis on the preciousness of life, it made sense that these were in quick turnaround. In a sense, they weren't about the pandemic, but given everyone was talking about their lives, I think they're important to include here. My hope is that somebody somewhere has chronicled the history of pandemic art, because I do believe it's an era we are slowly moving out of. Wounds have healed, and we're back to setting our sights on the future. Still, it's important to remember the 5 years. Not for us, then for future generations. To me, that's the value of art. It's documentation of facts as it is emotions. Many of them were painful, but only in processing trauma can we seek to grow as people. And that is why I want to spend the rest of the video highlighting the one piece of pandemic cinema that I feel best captured how I felt over the past 5 years.
Whatever. Fine. I guess I'm in. Might be fun to see how unstable I can get.
If this is what you find to be fun, then I do hope we achieve it!
You don't have to die if you don't want to die. You can take it all back in the nick of time. Maybe even play a good friend of mine. Baby,
In addition, the whole thing, all of that, little computerized marvel is packed into something which you can pick up and move around like that, even shake, and nothing happens, which is quite incredible, and means that it's got enormous potential eventually, once in the future it's perhaps made a little bit more compact for the car audio industry as well.
Why did you not lead with that?
My brain. I will make a note. For future visits, lead with memories.
I was scrolling through Hulu one afternoon when I discovered I'm Totally Fine. At the time I was in the mood for a random comedy, so I popped it on and was surprised at how much it connected with me. The story centered around Vanessa. We meet her on the way to a launch party for her organic soda company. As she confronts the party planner, she reveals that her business partner Jennifer has died. In a great piece of irony, the planner says it's too late to cancel the order. She didn't give the 24-hour notice and thus has to deal with the decor. There's also a DJ that shows up later, but that's not important right now. It's clear that Vanessa is not over the loss. What should be a happy day turns into one of conflicting emotions. Even as her organic soda lines the wall of stores, there's nobody who recognizes the effort. She's alone in a world she's paid to put a smile on her face. The artifice is overwhelming. While it allows Vanessa a chance for some great solo comedy, it also conveys the recognizable feeling of loneliness. Whether or not you've personally lost someone from COVID-19, the feeling was present in everyday life. I think the film perfectly captures an imbalance of self and society attempting to see eye to eye. There's your version of events. If you're suffering, everyone should notice it. There should be a moratorium on fun just long enough for you to grieve. I know this isn't specific to our modern age, but I have to believe the pandemic magnified it. As the story continues, Vanessa is visited by Jennifer. Only, it's not Jennifer. Even if there's allusions to Jennifer, we don't actually know the real her. The person or entity that we get is actually from another planet sent to study Vanessa's behavior patterns. The story continues down this kooky road. Vanessa learns to feel happy, then Jennifer leaves. Simple as that. Only I think that's doing disservice to the larger scope. For me, few characters embody how I felt during the pandemic quite like Jennifer. During 2020 and 2021, I spent way too many hours on TikTok. I was befriending strangers dispensing advice on things they probably didn't know much about. It was a confusing ecosystem. Most nights, I'd go to bed having seen at least one person in a hyper-depressive state. When nobody is listening, it makes sense to send a distress signal into the void. To me, Jennifer symbolizes less a full-bodied character and more what our memories do to people. Without anyone to argue against, we reconstruct their identities into several things. They should be the ideal self. They should conjure bright, vivid snapshots that make us grateful for ever meeting them. However, I think there's always the guilt that comes along with it. If a relationship ends poorly, you're left thinking what you did wrong, what they did wrong. It's never happenstance. Suddenly the innocence is weaponized, and in its place is this alien, this figure that the person could never actually be. That is Jennifer. A key detail about her is that she drains electricity. Given that Vanessa is often seen on her phone, it means Jennifer is more Figment. She speaks matter-of-factly without introspection. She is more receptacle for facts than any greater truths. She isn't driven by emotion and instead recalls facts and nobody's sure how she knows them. It makes you ask, is this really her? It can't be anyone else. It only makes sense that she has access to Vanessa's deepest secrets. To counter-argue, I think this is where you could hypothesize she's just a user history that hasn't been deleted and thus is resorting to autofill. Jennifer seems abnormal. Her sustenance involves olive oil. She isn't scared of hitchhiking. Everything she does symbolizes something deep in Vanessa's mind that she fears. As with the best comedies, it's depicted like an odd couple. Again, we never meet the real Jennifer, but by Vanessa willingly sharing information, we come to know her as something more than a Google search. There is one particular detail I caught upon rewatch. As the ticking clock winds down, Vanessa bares her soul. She recognizes that no matter what, she can't keep Jennifer from leaving. She apologizes for wasting her time arguing over trivial things. Even if these were reactions of time together, they symbolize a greater point that felt relevant during 2020. If this was the end, if we all woke up tomorrow and caught the virus, how would our lives be remembered? It's there in the pandemic art that sought to immortalize the struggles. However, I think all of us take certain things for granted. We all wish we could take some moments back and provide a greater sense of maturity. But would we actually? I'm generally not a fan of time travel stories for how convoluted they can be. I think what I've realized as I've gotten older is that the tragedy of life is that we learn from mistakes. We can't be born perfect. Sometimes we'll only recognize our faults when the dust has settled and there's no road back. This is clear later in the scene when Vanessa drops the big reveal. The organic soda company was actually 6 years in the making. Vanessa wishes she could have pushed to market much sooner. Her hesitation made sense at the time, but as she attended her launch party to a House of One, she realized the fragility of time. Jennifer was supposed to grow old with her. They were supposed to be successful as pioneers of a new drink. Instead, Jennifer passed away. The struggle to not feel complete guilt over this decision is natural. Who wouldn't want to go back and see if things turned out differently? Even if the launch was premature, they'd still be taking the risks together. It's a hypothesis that nobody will have the answer to. As someone with their own regrets since the pandemic started, there's a lot I wish could have been different. There's relationships I wish ended on better notes. I wish I took more career risks earlier so I could develop something more interesting. I wish I took things more seriously so I could be further along. But, as I said earlier, that's the tragedy of life. we learned from our mistakes. In life, I force myself to be an optimist. Efforts to search for a silver lining aren't always easy. Some days it's better just to give in to despair. But I need to try. The world would cease to matter if I gave in to cynicism so easily. To me, there needed to be a world after COVID-19. To be honest, we're nowhere near that. Because of how life works, we'll likely be forced to live alongside it for the rest of time. Hopefully, it will become less and less of a problem. Even then, there's the long haulers who struggle every day. I've caught it twice and I don't care to get it a third because my immune system sucks now. But I think this applies as much to the world I enter as it is the body I exist within. I have to believe that whatever pain I'm experiencing will heal. To me, the most revelatory thing about the past 5 years is that for as much as we haven't gotten better at handling airborne illnesses, we have become more open to discussion of mental health. I've come to admire people who are vulnerable. Maybe it's because I feel that way on such a personal level. I didn't realize how good it felt until I took to Twitter and said, "I'm sad." On the right day, I received the reception I wanted. To know someone heard my story meant the world to me. As corny as it sounds, I became the TikTokers I gawked at around 1 a.m. on a Tuesday. Even if I never actually made videos, I reached out. Even writing my feelings down put into context something that my mind couldn't achieve. Seeing it. Processing it. Accepting it. That's what it took to get better. For as real as the virus was, I needed to work on things I could control. If you have to ask why I'm totally fine resonates with me, it's because of this. It makes sense of the chaos we experience living in a time where everything feels like the end of the world. Giving in to destruction would be easy, but searching for answers is much more cathartic. To me, Jennifer symbolizes a struggle I had not only with the pandemic, but with overcoming my years of bottled up depression. It all came to a head when I had nothing to distract myself. I think, like all artists, I had something that I wanted to say. It just took me a little longer than expected to figure out what that was. And with that, I say thank you for watching. I've been a fan of this film for a while now, and felt like sharing my 2 cents. I promise it's not only because the director liked my Letterboxd review. Thanks, by the way. It really spoke to me and captured something that I felt a lot of films for the past 5 years didn't do too well. Some were carefree, others too sarcastic or unfocused to get to a bigger point. While I argue that Asteroid City might be the best piece of pandemic cinema we've gotten so far, I'm totally fine may be the one I feel is deserving of more recognition. I was not expecting this lighthearted comedy to take such a serious turn and delve into topics that I find hard to grapple with. So again, thank you for watching, and I'll talk with you real soon.
Now, in a way, it all sounds too good to be true. Other systems have, heaven knows, failed to live up to their pre-release promises to change the way we listen. Quadraphonic sound, for instance, died of starvation when not enough quad records were released. But with compact discs, we're assured there will be a rolling river of material. 7 major record companies have already signed up to produce on the system. With hardware and software both lined up, compact discs may well rule the roost, at least until someone perfects a method of putting Beethoven's Ninth on a silicon chip. Don't laugh. I'm assured that that day, in fact, is not too far off.
You know